and welcome to another of our Glasgow Film Festival podcasts. And today I'm joined by a previous podcast guest, director Peter Mackie Burns. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
And I'm now realising that I'm almost recording every conversation I have and turning it into a podcast, which is a terrible state of affairs. But anyway, it's really good to see you. And we're here to talk about a film that's going to be at the film festival, Rialto. Last time you were here, it was Daphne.
It was.
And that was well received pretty much across the board. Were you pleased with how that was?
Yeah, I was delighted. It was a surprise that it seemed to find a small but loyal audience.
Very much so.
Yeah, we were chuffed. And Emily Beecham, who was in Daphne's, gone to great things. She was in a movie, in fact she's in a movie at the film festival.
Oh, really? Okay.
Called Sulphur and White by Julian Jarrold.
Okay. Look out for that.
She's great, and she's in a movie called Little Joe,
right,
which is out I think just now, and she won the prize for Best Actress at Cannes last year.
Excellent.
So she's doing well.
She's doing well. And if you haven't seen Daphne, it's a fantastic film. In fact, it was on Film 4 recently, wasn't it?
It's on all 4 now.
Is it? Well, there you are, you can catch up on it. Well, we're here to talk about Rialto. So what can you tell us about that film?
Shall I start with the title?
Yes.
Okay. So, Rialto, of course, it's a bridge and a market in Venice.
Right.
But some town planner in Dublin named an area Rialto.
Right.
And the movie is set not in Venice, but in the south side of Dublin.
Right. Okay.
In an estate, a settled community called Rialto, which had a terrible reputation in the 80s as a sort of heroin hotspot.
Okay.
But the area is becoming gentrified now, and I think it's been reclaimed. But for a long time it was an area sort of people looked down upon.
So was it kind of scheme in the outskirts of Dublin?
Not in the outskirts per se, but in the south of Dublin.
Okay.
Which is surrounded by, sort of the even postcodes in Dublin, odd in the north, and even in the south, and it tends to be the more moneyed area in Dublin, the south side.
Okay.
So Rialto then, the character comes from there.
Mm-hmm.
He's left his working class roots. He's a middle-aged man. Mm-hmm. His name's Colm. He's gone to work in the docks, the only job he's ever had. And in the movie's set over 5 days when he sort of pulls the pin on his life.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And, his father's died a month before. His father and him didn't see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And he has an issue with alcohol and he's impotent. So it's a classic middle-aged man movie.
I'm interested, something I didn't realise when I watched it was his father died a month before, but yet the funeral is...
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah.
So, in the Catholic Church, particularly in Ireland, they have a thing called a month's mind. It's a mass a month after the funeral where the name is read out by the priest. So all you proddy dog.
Yes. That's good to know.
Yeah. So it's not a funeral per se, it's a mass.
Right, okay, got that. So, but it has the similar, the way
feeling,
they go to the pub and they,
that
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or in this case, only the immediate family go, no one else goes.
Yeah. So that asks the question why this was always going to be set in Ireland, because your screenwriter's from Ireland.
Indeed, he's from Rialto.
Is he really?
Indeed he is, where he lives.
So is this very personal story to him?
I think some of it's pretty personal to him, but it's, he's a wonderful screenwriter, very, very talented. His name's Mark O'Halloran. He's an actor and a screenwriter, and he's famous across the length and breadth of Ireland and also in Europe because of a couple of movies that he wrote and worked on. So he wrote and starred in a comedy called Adam and Paul. Back in the day, which was the brilliant director Lenny Abrahamson's first movie.
Right.
And he actually plays one of the lead guys in it. It's a comedy about it's Bechettian sort of comedy about 2 heroin addicts waking up. One of them stuck to a mattress outside, and they have to walked from one side of Dublin to the other.
Yeah.
It's a great film, black comic film. And he also made another great film with Len Abramson called Garage,
Okay.
which is a wonderful black comedy. So I knew his writing, and he doesn't write many screenplays. I think he's maybe written 4 or 5, but he's a working actor too. He's a really good actor. He was in Shane Meadows' TV show The Virtues,
Oh yes.
which was on recently,
Uh-huh.
also on All 4.
There you go.
Can't believe I'm giving All 4 and Shane Meadows a plug, but there you are. And he's in that. He's a really good actor. And he's coming to the Q&A.
Okay.
We're doing it at Glasgow Film Festival.
Which is on the
27th.
Yeah.
Thursday the 27th, 8:30 screening GFT.
Yeah, which is important to see. Will you be able to see the film for yourself? So that explains why it's set in Ireland. I wasn't sure about that itself, but it was always going to be that way. What did that throw up problems for you working in Ireland that were different from working in, because Daphne's set in London?
Yeah. Well, what happened was the producers of Daphne phoned me, Tristan Gallagher and Valentina Brazzini, the producers and of a company called The Bureau, who make lots of first, second and third feature films.
Okay.
That's their MO. So they found great directors they work with, like Asif Kapadia did his first film. Lynn Ramsey, I think, did the first film with Bertrand, who set up The Bureau. So they're always looking for first, second, sometimes third. Andrew Hay, the guy who made Weekend in 45 Years.
Yes.
Lean on Pete.
So when you say first, second, third, would they take a director and do their first, second and third? Yeah, okay.
Often first and second, sometimes even third film. So I'd done Daphne with them, and they called me and said, "Listen, have you heard of Mark O'Halloran?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a fan of his writing, he's great." And said, "Well, would you like to throw your ring in the hat? Or your hat in the ring, rather?" Don't really want to throw my ring anywhere. Would you throw your hat in the ring and be considered for doing a screenplay by him? So I said, "Sure, let me read it." And I read it. I thought it was terrific. So it was, it was already quite far developed down the road.
Right.
So they had most of the funding in place, certainly from Ireland.
Right.
And it was a co-production between the UK and Ireland. So I'd worked with the producers before. I loved the writer. The format was there. So in a sense, it was as easy as doing a co-production of a film in another country could be.
Yeah.
And of course the film's in English.
Yeah.
So, that wasn't...
And in terms of deciding to do it, you almost went with Mark's reputation and your kind of love him alone rather than... So, because having watched the film, I thought these are subjects I can see Peter might be interested in. No, I just mean in terms of your films are character films. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, that's a character film, definitely.
And that's what it is,
Yeah. Well, I hadn't planned to make another character film after Daphne. So Daphne, the main character's in every scene, almost in every frame of the film.
Yeah.
So I'd started work on another film about a mother and son, a Christmas movie, funnily enough.
Okay.
When this came along, and again a character film, but the main character's never seen. But I thought it was such an interesting character who's on quite an unusual journey.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is too good to pass up, because I think the story is terrific. So it's quite a familiar, in a sense. It's you may be familiar with the setup of the film in a sense from other films. So a middle-aged man who's grieving has a difficult marriage, and something about the death of his recent father seems to propel him into a sort of chaos.
Yeah.
And one day he decides to go and becomes obsessed by a young male prostitute.
Yeah.
And he's propelled into a life or an encounter with a male prostitute. And he isn't a gay man.
Yeah.
But he's propelled into this strange world. And
it is almost a decision.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think so.
I don't want to give anything away overly. It's a situation that you could walk away from, but he decides to.
But he doesn't.
Go the other way.
I think he's looking to explode his life.
Yeah.
you know. So he has a loving wife and 2 kids. He gets on very well with his daughter. His son
Yes.
is quite rebellious and doesn't like his father, as my own son would say. Dad, you're lame. So he doesn't have a great relationship with him. So something about the death of his father has propelled him into turmoil in his own life, and he sort of seeks solace in a relationship with a young man who's a sex worker.
Yeah.
And it's kind of odd, because the reason why I was interested in the film per se is that between them they form this sort of very deeply, deeply flawed safe space for both of them, where they can talk about their lives in an unfettered sense.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's quite interesting in one sense, because these men, and the young sex worker Jay, who's like 20, is a new father, you know, and he's doing sex work for money. And Colm is a middle-aged, impotent man.
Yeah.
Who can't speak to his wife or can't speak to any of his workmates.
Yeah.
And
there are other things falling apart.
There's other things falling apart. He's losing his job. You know, he's losing his relationship with his family. He feels partially to blame because he couldn't save his father. His father had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And he was there and he couldn't, you know, didn't have the wherewithal to, or the ability to save him. You know, so he's in a pretty dark place. And what I like about the character is that the journey he goes on is pretty dark, you know. He ends up in a relationship with a young boy, and he pulls the pin in his own family life. And it's not that he dislikes his family, he loves them.
Yeah.
And the self-destructive behaviour, he has to blow himself up, I think, to finally face himself.
It's an amazing central performance, because a bit like Emily with Daphne, he's almost in it. I think he's almost in every
scene. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that thing with phone. It's also I was thinking about other like writers. So this kind of drama of the everyday, because it kind of is that. Although it's an extraordinary situation, in some ways it's one that would happen. Everything in it you would think will happen to someone at some point. Not everything in it, but you know, a lot of the things that certainly set them off. And that's something that you're kind of interested in, the kind of details of people every day and how that kind of plays out.
I was speaking to someone lately, and I don't really... you're attracted to the work that you're attracted to.
Yeah.
You know? And some people believe that, you know, perhaps as a director, I'm not sure about writers, but you find your territory and you explore it, you know. And there's the other school of thought, I suppose, which said, you know, every movie's different.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
I think the films I'm interested in are the filmmakers, probably novelists too, where they find their territory and they refine it. And I was speaking to someone, they said, well, the thing that your 2 movies have in common are sort of big things happening to everyday people.
Yes.
You know, extraordinary things to ordinary people, perhaps. And I thought, oh, well, that's quite interesting, because I would never sort of analyse my own work. You know, I make it.
Yeah.
And then I look for the next thing to make.
Folk with microphones to say, oh, I get it. But even going back to your short films, there is that thing about very relatable
characters.
Characters, absolutely.
Yeah, family, intergenerational relationships interest me. But I suppose they're the thing of all drama, and they have been to date, but you know, the next film might be different.
Yeah.
You know,
they are, but there's an honesty in both your films, in features, in that I think the people act as I would almost expect them to act. With a couple of, you say, there's in everyone's life there's decisions you think, oh, if I'd done that differently, things might have gone very, very differently, either good or bad. But in the whole, in terms of one-on-one relationships, I think people act as you might expect them to. It's not looking for
the fantastical
or the big resolve
Yes.
at the end. It made me think of when Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld were first writing Seinfeld. No learning, no hugging.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite that, but you know what I mean? You're not kind of
Well, I think
looking for easy answers in it.
Funny talking about Larry David, I was watching Curb Your Enthusiasm with my daughter the other day, and she said to me, she'd never seen it before, she said, "Dad, you're like him, but not funny." I was like, thanks.
Oh, yes.
She hasn't watched Seinfeld yet. She loves Friends, so I'm hoping she's 12. So I'm hoping she'll get into Seinfeld soon, and maybe I could sit and watch some of them.
Following a theme, I believe they might be on all four as well. So
Oh, there you go. Oh my God.
That's sponsored by. Another thing I'm very interested in with Rialto is the music, or the soundtrack rather.
Ah, right, sure.
So there was a sense of dread about it. Was that a kind of deliberate thing?
Yeah. I worked when I first started cutting the film. I knew that I wanted to have a score for the film, and what I quite like doing, and it's quite a common tool in filmmaking, I'm sure it is in other arts too, but it's contrast. So if you say Daphne and even Rialto are pitched round about the realm of, you might say, the genre of social realism, then what I try to do in that is use, say, colour, for example, as an expressionistic thing that you wouldn't normally associate with social realism.
Yeah, okay.
And these two elements clash with each other. And I often think if things clash and you don't expect the sound and image, you know, to be what you think it should be, then it creates a bit of tension in the film.
Yeah.
So what I thought with making a social realist film with Daphne, well, I wanted to make the sound and work with a score that would clash with what you'd normally, and hopefully it would create some interesting tension when it clashes. So what I have is an orchestrated score in effectively what looks like a social realist film.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that was pretty old-fashioned. I wanted to use the inner life of Colm, which you don't see. Like in real life, you don't see people's, in everyday life, you tend not to see people's inner life, but you get hints of it through what they do and how they do it, or what their interests are. And I thought, well, could we use the score, it's an old trope, to try to illustrate in some sense or hint at the central character's inner life,
right?
Which is actually more heightened and melodramatic and full of suspense than he might appear to be.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that you could be sitting next to someone on the bus or the tube or past them and you don't really know,
of course,
what's going on inside them. And I thought, well, in film, then we could use the score to help create another element of the character, which seems at odds with often what you see.
Yeah.
So I worked on that with a brilliant French composer, young guy from Paris. When I say young, I think he's 30.
I know what you mean.
Called Valentin Hajjaj. And he did the music for a movie that was out last year called Girl. Okay. You've seen it? It was in Toronto. It was a great film, but it was released here about a transgender ballet dancer. It's a really good film. And the producer of this movie, Tristan, was in Toronto and saw Girl, and he said, well, you should listen to this guy. So I listened to his stuff online, and we managed to call him up because Girl was quite a big hit in France and Europe and the festivals, and we managed to get him at a good rate before he becomes too famous. And we met, and I spoke to him about the ideas and the film, and I think it's very difficult to talk about music if you're not a musician.
Sure.
You know, it's very hard to get a grasp without going, then I want it to go dun dun dun, you know. But he could listen to my, terrible ideas or notes, and from that he built a score which I think's terrific.
Oh, it's amazing. It kind of caught me unaware of it, because initially you're sitting down and you're kind of getting the drama and trying to work out the characters, and you think, it's almost like a kind of horror. It reminded me a little bit of music from Under the Skin.
Yes, that's exact. That's really interesting because Mika Levy, the score for Under the Skin is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So when I was cutting the film, I used Under the Skin as temp.
Ah, there you go.
As temp music.
Yeah.
And so it uses similar instrumentation.
Yes.
Uses the cello, but actually one of the biggest influences on it for me is Bernard Herrmann.
Right.
It's similar to the music from Vertigo in places, but also absolutely. I want it to be a classical score but contemporary.
Yeah.
And I love Mika Levy too. She's
absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And that was very much the intention, to try make the audience feel, there's something brewing.
Yeah, that's what I got about it, and it kind of creeps up on you, which is rather nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
Because there's lots of space in the film to reflect on what's going on, and that's when it kind of comes into the side and you realise, wait a minute, this music is directing me in some way that's not comfortable. Yeah,
he's a very good composer. He's very, very smart. I think he'll probably be... I don't think I'll be able to afford them for the next film. But he's extraordinary. Really talented guy.
So when did you finish up Rialto? Has that been done recently or...?
I can't remember. I think we finished... when was it? So this is... where are we now? This is February... 2020, thank you. I think we finished up the cut and the mastering, everything, and doing the sound. We did the sound over in Sweden. I think we finished that almost a year ago.
Wow.
And then, of course, with the small art house films, you send them off to film festivals.
That's what I was going to ask. When does it go from being finished and then you almost switch into, right, we have to promote this now and get it out there?
Almost. You look at the dates of the A-list festivals, the big festivals that get attention, when they're coming up, when the submissions open, when they close, and if you try to finish if there's a date coming up, so you try to finish for, say, Sundance, or you try to finish for Cannes, or you try to finish for Venice or Berlin, the A-list festivals. So at the small indie film, to get a film into one of those festivals, there's 3 in Europe, Berlin, Cannes the biggest one, and Venice too. Okay. Those are the 3 main ones in Europe, and in America it's Sundance, Telluride. So if you apply for one and they're interested, then you have to wait a while, and if they say yes, then you have to sit on it. Right. It sits in a digital drawer, in a file, until they can announce it. So we were extremely fortunate that Venice came on really early. They liked the film a lot, and we had to wait for 7 months or something.
Really, as long as that? Wow.
Yeah, but after I've made the film and it's locked, my job, but that part of it's done.
Sure.
So I can use that time to try write or get another project off the go. So in a way, as soon as I'm done with it, it disappears until it goes into the cinemas or it goes into a festival.
So because when it comes into festivals, then obviously you're called on again.
Yeah, you go
Q&As.
Yeah, you go and sing for your supper. You try to build an audience and promote the film. You end up doing podcasts.
Exactly. And
Q&As.
Yeah, all of these things I'm sure you enjoy very much. And what about something next? Are you working on something new?
Yeah,
Talk about it, or?
I'm working on a few projects with the Bureau.
Right.
2 of them are, I can say...
Did that sound like coming from Kafka?
2 of them are movies, and one's a TV idea.
Uh-huh.
And I'm working on a TV idea with another company too. So I have some irons in the fire, but I can't really talk about them because none of them have been greenlit yet.
I'm guessing dragons and aliens and all that.
Well, funnily enough, a bit of a change.
Oh, really interesting.
Yeah, with one of the movie projects is a bigger cast and it's set in London. It has it's a romance, and it has a political backdrop to it, and it's not a single character thing, and has a bit more suspense and a little bit more politics in it.
Excellent. Well, Peter, I think it's time for us to call it a day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing the film at the Glasgow Film Festival when it's on, and firing some difficult questions at you.
Please do. Please do.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different. Cheers.